Hare Krishna. Om Darshya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mayam Dadanti Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapatakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shya Shri Rupam Sagrajanam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Satvaitam Swavadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pada Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanitam Shya He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanjana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Dishavanushtute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kirpa Sindhu Bhayevata Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gauravarta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shashwin, for the wonderful Acharya. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. We have a new participant today, Lala Gopala Dasi. Mataji, you are welcome to the group. Thank you for joining in. Where are you joining in from, Mataji?
Krishna Mataji, I'm from Russia, Yekaterinburg.
Okay, thank you very much for joining in all the way from there. What is the time difference, Mataji?
It's 10 p.m. now.
Oh, it's 10 p.m. So yeah, we are really fortunate to have you, and you are so dedicated that even at that time of the night when we all are asleep, you are up here listening to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Mataji, this group meets every day, even on Saturdays and Sunday at the same time. So if we really welcome you to this group. Let us all chant 3 Hari Bols to welcome Mataji to this group. Let's unmute. Hari Bol. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
Thank you. Okay, so Hare Krishna, everybody. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, we are reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. We are on Canto 1, Chapter 6, and the text for today is text 19, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, we hand over to you unless you want us to read the text, translation, and purport. We are at your disposal, Prabhuji.
That's fine. We can do what we usually do. You can read the Sanskrit word-for-word translation and purport, and then I can.
Okay. Then I'll let our engine, Shashwin, to guide us. Shashwin, are you able to read the text 19? We
Yes,
start
ma'am.
with Om Namo Bhagavate. Om.
Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudhirayet Nastapayesva Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki Titrukshustad Aham Bhuya Pranidaya Manohrudi Vikshamano Pinapasyam Avitrupta Ivaturaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Would anybody like to do the word to word? We are on text 19. Okay, maybe I can continue. Trikshu, desiring to see. Tat, that. Aham, I. Bhuya, again. Pranidya, having concentrated the mind. Manaha, mind. Riddhi, upon the heart. Vikshamaya, Vikshamana, waiting to see. Be in spite of. Na, never. Apasyam, saw him. Avitraptaha, without being satisfied. Eva, like. Atura, aggrieved. Peter Prabhu, is it possible for you to read the translation and purport? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Hare Krishna to all the Vaishnavas joining me today. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I desire to see again that transcendental form of the Lord, but despite my attempts to concentrate upon the heart with eagerness to view the form again, I could not see him anymore, and thus dissatisfied, I was very much aggrieved. Purport. There is no mechanical process to see the form of the Lord. It completely depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. We cannot demand the Lord to be present before our vision, just as we cannot demand the sun to rise whenever we like. The sun rises out of his own accord. So also the Lord is pleased to be present out of his causeless mercy. One should simply await the opportune moment and go on discharging his prescribed duty in devotional service of the Lord. Narad Muni thought that the Lord could be seen again by the same mechanical process which was successful in the first attempt. But in spite of his utmost endeavor, he could not make the second attempt successful. The Lord is completely independent of all obligations. He can simply be bound up by the tie of unalloyed devotion, nor is he visible or perceivable by our material senses. When he pleases, being satisfied with the sincere attempts of devotional service, depending completely on the mercy of the Lord, then he may be seen out of his own accord. Haribo.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Shashwin and Peter Prabhuji, for leading us. I hand over to Brijesh Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, welcome to the group. Thank you for all your time and efforts today, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Mukham karoti bhachalam bhangum lugete girim yat kripatam ham vande shikrum vinitaram. So thank you, Mataji. Thank you for the elderate group, and also to Kanjamja Prabhu for letting me cover for him today. I pray and seek the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas, especially the seniors, to be able to speak something that will be purifying, transformational, and yeah, just something that we can all meditate on today. And I think that's going to be one thing for today's verse especially as well. So I'm going to do something a bit different. So the theme that I've kind of chosen for today is this whole aspect of sincerely endeavoring coupled with the causeless mercy of the Lord. But if we just go back to how we came to this verse in the first place, right? We're in verse 19. So if we just look at just the overview of the chapter. So we start off the chapter with Vyasadeva just being very inquisitive about Narada's perfection, right? Vyasadeva, as we know, is the disciple of Shri Narad Muni. And so he wants to understand what is it that Narad Muni actually did to attain perfection. So then as the disciple, he can follow in Narada's footsteps. And then Narada is giving his sort of story. He talks about how he's the only child of his simple maidservant mother, just an only child. So quite naturally, he's grown up with as much affection as his mother could give. But at the age of 5, his mother gets bitten by a serpent. Now, for an ordinary 5-year-old boy, right? I don't know how old Sushwin is actually, but probably thereabouts or something. 5 to 7 or something. Now, for an ordinary boy, like mother kind of passing away when you're 5 years old, no father, it's a devastating situation. But Narad Muni takes it as the special mercy of the Lord, right? And he takes that as his sort of beginning of his spiritual quest. He starts going up north. And we hear about his treacherous journey. He goes, he passes mountains, waterfalls, so many different places, both materially opulent, as well as things like dark and dangerous forests. He's experiencing God's creation firsthand, right? Trusting and surrendering to Krishna in the process. And then eventually he comes to an uninhabited forest, where by the mercy and the enlightenment that he's received from the bona fide spiritual masters that he served before, he begins to meditate on the Supersoul. And we can see his exalted position here actually, because as soon as he starts to meditate, what happens? He starts crying. He's not crying out of material sort of distress. He's crying because of his love for the Lord. He's crying because he's in a state of bhava, right? And the Lord gives him darshan. That's the exalted position that Narada has. But then very quickly, the Lord takes the darshan back. He disappears. And that's where we arrive at today, verse 19, where try as Narada might, to try and bring back that darshan of the Lord again, that form of the Lord in his heart, he's unable to do so. And so as it's mentioned, right, he's dissatisfied and he's aggrieved. And then in the purport, the first line itself, what's Prabhupada telling us, right? He's saying that there is no mechanical process to see the form of the Lord. Mechanical process. What do we think of when we hear the word mechanical, right? What do we think of? We think of maybe like machines, cars, phones, laptops, something like that, Objects. We think of objects, that too impersonal objects, right? Right off the back, Prabhupada's reminding us here that actually the Lord is personal, right? The Lord is a person. A mechanical process doesn't work with a person, right? So this statement is actually there to give us hope that there is a process by which we can see the Lord, but it's built on personalism, not impersonalism. And as we'll read later on, that process is building love and is built on love and devotion, right? It's built on developing a relationship with the Lord. But then immediately, Prabhupada then says that it completely depends on the causeless mercy of the Lord. And then he also gives us an example of the sun, that we can't control the sun. We can't force the sun to move by our own will. The sun comes, appears at its own time, and then disappears at its own time. And in the same way, we can't force the Lord to appear. The Lord appears at his time and he disappears at his time. So which one is it? Do we have a process by which we can see the Lord? It's just that it's not mechanical, or is it all entirely and completely dependent on the causeless mercy of the Lord? When the Lord decides then he'll come. If he doesn't decide, then he won't come. So now we're in a dilemma. Do we just sit around, just doing our normal activities, going down to the pubs on a Friday night or whatever it is, just carrying on with our activities and waiting, the Lord will appear when he wants to appear. Oftentimes if we're book disputing or something, especially with Asian Indian crowds, we get that, it'll happen when it's meant to happen kind of thing. Destiny, if the Lord decides, then I'll serve him. If not, then doesn't matter. Hari bol. Or do we actually try and do something to see the Lord? Do we endeavor in a certain way? And then the other question is like, what even is causeless mercy? We hear it all the time. Prabhupada's mercy, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy, Krishna's mercy. We hear it all the time, but what actually is causeless mercy? But then afterwards, in the middle, Prabhupada reconciles the two statements. He says that one should simply await the opportune moment and go on discharging his prescribed duty in devotional service of the Lord. Causeless mercy is not something that we can actually get by an activity we perform, right? It's causeless. And what does causeless mean? It means that there's no like definitive, this is how you get it, right? It's something that the Lord gives by his own free will, right? It's completely dependent on the Lord's desire to give it. But with correct endeavors, right? If we endeavor correctly, then we can attract that causeless mercy, right? And what is that correct endeavor? Prabhupada tells us it's discharging our prescribed duty in devotional service of the Lord. We shouldn't try to see the Lord, but we should act in such a way that the Lord wants to see us, right? And isn't that the whole endeavor of Krishna consciousness? It's acting in a way that the Lord is pleased. Not necessarily to go and see the Lord, but so that the Lord is pleased with us, so he wants to come and see us. In Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 4, Krishna tells us how he reciprocates according to our surrender, right? Right? As all surrender unto me, meaning Krishna, I reward them accordingly. Now remember, the Lord is a person, so he responds not just according to what we do, but according to our feelings, our emotions, our love. And the intensity of our bhakti, our devotion, our love, determines the extent to which Krishna reciprocates, right? And here's another thing, right? Bhakti. Bhakti means devotion, but oftentimes we see that Srila Prabhupada translates bhakti as devotional service. Why is that, right? Bhakti or love, right? Love or devotion is a verb, right? It's something that we do. It's an activity. It's not just a noun that we say, okay, we just say that, yes, it's a word. I love you, Krishna, or whatever, If I tell somebody that I love them, then how much I truly love them is showcased by what I do for them, right? If I tell, I don't know, Peter Prabhu or anybody, just picking Prabhus just for respect, if I tell somebody that I love you, if I tell Peter Prabhu I love you, then if I never engage in any sort of interactions, any dealings with Peter Prabhu, if I don't speak to him, if I don't serve him, if I don't interact with him, then do I really love him? Do I really love Peter Prabhu? At that point, if I'm not doing anything, but I'm just saying that I love you, then it's just empty words, right? It's just an empty statement. So in the same way, we can showcase to Krishna how much we love him by acting in that loving relationship. And what's that act? The act is rendering devotional service unto him. And we've been given a very beautiful process of devotional service by our acharyas. It's following the sadhana bhakti process, right? Following regulative principles, which when it matures into transcendental love of God, right? That's when we can really feel the potency of a loving relationship with Krishna. But as with any process, whether it's material, karmic, career-based processes or spiritual processes, there's always certain principles, certain things that we have to follow, right? Certain parameters that we have to follow in order to get success. And these parameters are basically described in the Nectar of Instruction for us. And specifically, I want to bring the attention to verse 3, which describes 6 favorable principles. And then specifically, I want to focus on the first 3, right? Which says Utsaha Nishchaya Dharyat. So what are they? Utsaha, right? Utsaha means to be enthusiastic. Nishchaya, means endeavoring with confidence. And then dharyat, being patient. So when we practice spiritual life, we have to always remember these three things. We have to be enthusiastic, we have to endeavor confidently, and at the same time, we have to learn to be patient. But we're living in an age, in a prime age of Kali Yuga, where we want everything quickly. Is it not? Right? And oftentimes that too with little to no effort. You know, we want one-click checkouts. We want fast track services, Amazon Prime, next day delivery, so many things, you know, we just want quickly, quickly, quickly. And then when we come to spiritual life, we oftentimes bring that same conditioning into our spiritual practices. You know, one day we're chanting the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then 5 seconds later, we're questioning like, why don't I have love of Godhead yet? You know, I've been chanting, I've just chanted one round. Why do I not have love of Godhead yet? Is it not? Like, I know when I'm chanting japa, it's like, I'm struggling, but I'm like thinking like, why have I not got love for God? You know, but that's not how it works, right? In the purport of Nectar Instruction verse 3, Prabhupada actually says a very nice, a short statement. Bhakti is a sort of cultivation, right? Bhakti is a sort of cultivation. What does that tell us, right? When we think of cultivation, there's activity involved. There's a practice, right? It has to be done. There's effort involved. We have to put effort in to cultivate anything, whether it's within us, in a community, or anything like that. And ultimately, it takes time. Cultivation takes time, right? So when we're practicing spiritual life, we have to practice the process with diligence, right? We have to put the effort in. We have to perform the activity of devotional service. But equally, we have to patiently wait for Krishna's mercy, right? And along with that, we have to be enthusiastic. Isn't it true? Like in any activity, any field of activity that we do, maybe it's a career, maybe it's relationships. If we're not enthusiastic about it, if we're not enthusiastic about trying to achieve success in that field, then oftentimes we won't get success at all. What happens is that we'll get bored of it, right? And if we get bored of it, then usually two things happen. One is that we either give it up. Oh, you know, it's boring. There's nothing in this. I'll just try something else. Or we might just not make progress. We'll stagnate, right? Like, for example, I know we've got a doctor on this call, and you have to put the effort in a lot, you know, to keep up to mark, to make sure that you're at the top of your game, so that when you're going into the theater, etc., when you're speaking to patients, you know what you're talking about. But if you just decide, you know what, I don't want to put effort in, I don't want to be enthusiastic about growing in my career, then you just stagnate. You just stay where you are. You won't grow. In fact, you might even deteriorate. You might no longer be relevant in your practice. So when we practice spiritual life, right, we should engage in devotional service, but with the right mood of enthusiasm, confident endeavor, and patience. And what these three things do is that they prime us, right? They prime ourselves to be recipients of Krishna's mercy, right? It's not that they itself are the only things required for Krishna's mercy, but they set a foundation for us to be recipients, so that we can, you know, really receive and appreciate Krishna's mercy. And that's what attracts Krishna's mercy, actually. It's what pleases Krishna. And Prabhupada says the same thing, right? In the next part of the purport, he says that he can simply be bound up by the tie of unalloyed devotion. Now, when we're talking about binding Krishna, what better pastime to talk about than Yashodhama binding Krishna to a grinding mortar, right? I think everybody on this call is probably quite familiar with the pastime, so I'll just go through it in brief. But, you know, Krishna is very naughty. He's just broken some pots. He's realized that he's being seen, he's been caught. So he's running, Yashodhama's running behind him. Eventually there's a nice, like a sweet Krishna conscious version of a car chase scene happens basically between Krishna and Yashoda. And eventually Yashoda catches Krishna. And as a punishment, she's not really going to hit Krishna, but by showing the stick to Krishna, Krishna gets very scared and starts crying. And so Yashoda's, you know, a very nice, loving mother. So she goes, okay, I won't hit you. But to avoid you getting into more trouble, she decides to bind Krishna to a grinding mortar. Yashoda's there, Krishna's there, and the grinding mortar is there. Krishna's standing right by the grinding mortar, and Yashoda's right, okay, I'm going to bind you now. I'm going to get some rope. You wait here, I'll grab a rope. Wraps around, tries to bind. 2 fingers too short. Okay, maybe the rope's too short, you know, maybe the rope's too short. Gets another longer piece of rope from the house. Tries to bind. Ugh. Okay, still 2 fingers too short. Okay, maybe I don't have enough long enough rope. Asks the neighbor for some rope. Extra long rope, yeah, from the neighbor's house. Tries to bind. Ugh. Still not binding, Krishna. Okay, let me choose something smart. Let me take all the ropes. That will be long enough, right? Take all the ropes, tie them together, and try to bind Krishna. Tries, and still she can't bind it. Still 2 fingers too short. Now, this is Krishna we're talking about. Yeah, Krishna's unlimited. We know in the Bhagavad Gita that when Krishna is showing the Virat Roop, what do we see? What does Arjuna describe, right? Krishna's unlimited mouths, unlimited eyes, ears, face, unlimited bodies, unlimited universes. You know, here's Yashoda trying to bind somebody who's unlimited. How can unlimited be bound? And yet Yashoda is here endeavoring, right? With enthusiasm. It's not that she's like, oh, you know, for the pastime, I have to showcase that I'm trying to bind you. So, you know, I'll just get a small piece of rope and I'll just pretend to try and bind you. No, she's actually trying to bind Krishna. And she's doing it with confident endeavor. She's like, okay, this rope didn't work, but this one will definitely work. Okay, that didn't work. This next rope will definitely work. Keeps trying. And she's patient. It's not that she gives up after 3, 4. You know, it's described that she's sweating, right? She's actually getting exhausted by her endeavors. That's how much endeavor she's putting in. But then what happens? As Yashoda is getting exhausted, Krishna's heart melts, right? It doesn't melt because Yashoda was successful in binding Krishna. It's melting because he's seeing the devotional endeavor that Yashoda displayed, right? And then Krishna decides, yes, I'll agree to be bound now. By his causeless mercy, he agrees to be bound. And the next time Yashoda binds, he's bound. Our acharyas actually give a very nice description, right? It's of the 2 fingers, too short, right? What they mean, the 2 fingers. It's described that the 2 fingers can be explained as bhaktanishta and svanishta. So what do they mean? So bhaktanishta is that firm faith, right? What faith? In what? Firm faith in the endeavor to serve and worship the Lord with determination, right? So it's the endeavor that the devotee puts to serve and worship the Lord. And swanishta means that causeless mercy that the Supreme Lord gives, not just randomly, but by seeing the devotee's efforts. So we have 2 things here, right? The tireless endeavor coupled with Lord Krishna's compassionate mercy. And what happens is that Krishna then becomes easily available to his devotees. And we can create a very nice like devotional formula out of this, right? A success formula for a devotional life, let's say. Sincere, heartfelt endeavor plus causeless mercy of the Lord equals success in spiritual life, right? So our endeavor with the Lord's mercy means that we will be successful in devotional life. And actually, if we see on another level, the mere fact that we're engaged, you know, all of the Asami, there are 19 of us on this call, right? The mere fact that we're engaged and endeavoring in devotional service, listening to Krishna Katha itself is devotional service. That in itself is mercy of the Lord, right? In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Madhya Leela, there's a nice verse. Brahmande Brahmita Kona Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. Translation. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. by the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master, such a person receives the seed of the creeper of devotional service. That's interesting. Devotional service here is described as a creeper. Do we know what or how a creeper grows? Creepers usually grow by taking, so there's two, there's a climber and then there's a creeper, right? So creepers are actually quite weak, generally speaking. They rely and they depend on bigger plants, on trees and stronger plants to actually grow, use them as support to grow. So by nature, creepers are dependent on others to grow. And so for that reason, creepers especially have to be carefully protected and nourished and looked after, after being planted. And in the same way, our devotional service needs to be protected and carefully nourished. How do we do that? By engaging ourselves in Krishna conscious activities, right? By engaging in the 9 limbs of devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, etc. Right? When we engage in them, then we protect and nourish the creeper of devotional service. There's a common saying, at least in the UK, like God helps those who help themselves. I think it stems from Christianity, actually, right? So if we're sincere, then we follow the prescribed duties and practice devotional service, and then Krishna will help us. When we're endeavoring to protect that devotional service, Krishna would of course help us. I mean, nourishing ourselves is what Krishna and the acharyas have told us to do. Then where's the question of Krishna not helping us, Okay, so that's so much about devotional service, but why is devotional service emphasized so much, Why is devotional service the way to Krishna's heart? There's a common saying, like, that a way to a man's heart is through the stomach, right? So why is the way to Krishna's heart through devotional service? Why can't we just be good human beings? Why can't we just look out for each other and why can't we just do that? Actually, in the Nectar of Devotion, there's a passage describing that describes how to attract Krishna, right? It's all about attracting Krishna, and I'll read out 2 paragraphs from that. This is in chapter 1, I believe. So Srila Rupa Goswami has stated that devotional service attracts even Krishna. Krishna attracts everyone, but devotional service attracts Krishna. The symbol of devotional service is, in the highest degree, is Radharani. Krishna is called Madana Mohan, which means that he is attractive. He is so attractive that he can defeat the attraction of thousands of cupids. But Radharani is still more attractive, for she can even attract Krishna. Therefore, devotees call her Madan Mohan Mohini, the attractor of Cupid. To perform devotional service means to follow in the footsteps of Radharani, and devotees in Vrindavan put themselves under the care of Radharani in order to achieve perfection in their devotional service. In other words, devotional service is not an activity of the material world. It is directly under the control of Radharani. In Bhagavad Gita, it is confirmed that the Mahatmas, or great souls, are under the protection of Devi Prakriti, the internal energy Radharani. So being directly under the control of the internal potency of Krishna, devotional service attracts even Krishna himself. Right? So devotional service means that we're actually engaging in activities that attract Krishna's heart. It's our endeavor to bind Krishna, just as Mother Yashoda endeavored to bind Krishna with rope. But for us, it's all under the direction and guidance of Srimati Radharani. And that's actually why devotional service is emphasized so much, right? The whole process of Krishna consciousness is to develop a loving relationship with the Lord, right? That's why it's called Krishna consciousness. We want to try and imbibe the Lord's presence in our consciousness at all times. And that happens when we have love for somebody, right? Isn't it? Like, especially for those who I've, who have kind of come from that background of the younger days and where you're interacting, then if you love someone, whether it's parents, somebody else, like of the opposite gender, or whatever, like, when you're loving them, then you think about them more. Parent children are the prime. Parents love their children so much that they're always thinking about the children, right? And what better way for us to develop that loving relationship than by following in the footsteps of somebody that attracts the Lord herself, right? Srimati Radharani. We're trying to connect with someone, right? We're trying to connect with Krishna. And what we're saying is that actually the way to connect with Krishna, the easiest way to connect with Krishna is by connecting with someone that he likes. You know, he likes Radharani. So by us serving and being there, following in Radharani's footsteps, it's a no-brainer that Krishna is going to be more ready to give us his time. We can give a example from even like the mundane material world, right? Like if we're a aspiring entrepreneur, whatever career we're in, right? We want to try and get association of somebody who's quite high up in that field. Then what do? You know, we can try and approach them, but it's so difficult. Or we can see, okay, he's a family man. Okay, he's got a son, he's got a daughter. Okay, let me try and develop a relationship with them. Let me serve them. Let me try and befriend them. And then naturally, when the father, the businessman or whoever it is, sees that, oh, you know, like this Lala Gopala Mataji, she's engaging with my daughter, they're quite close. Let me try and get to know Lala Gopala Mataji, right? So now here's the businessman who's like, okay, seeing Lala Gopala Mataji going, okay, I'm going to, like, you're friends, you're serving my daughter so nicely, let me get to know you, you know? He's now ready to get to know you. Whereas what happened before, oh, like, who are you again? Like, I don't know you, I don't know anyone who knows you, right? And that's how we can develop relationships. Isn't it true? Like, generally speaking, we develop relationships with friends, and then friends, and there's friends, right? And that's the way, by trying to develop our relationship by serving in the footsteps of Srimati Radharani, in the association of devotees, we can attract Krishna, we can attract Krishna's glance upon us that, oh, like, you know, I didn't see him there before, but now he's there. He's with my other devotees. Let me look at him for a bit. Let me see what he's doing. Let me see what he's like. But then Prabhupada takes us on another part of the roller coaster, right? He then says that actually, we can't perceive the Lord with our material senses, you know? So he starts off by giving us some hope, you know, there's a process out there, and then he goes, no, you know, it's all down to Krishna's mercy. But then he says, you know, you can do some devotional service, but even then, with your material conditioning, with our material senses, we can't really see him. I mean, Krishna is completely spiritual, right? Aham Sarvasya Prabhu, he's the source, the origin of the spiritual and the material worlds, right? So what qualification do we even have to see him with our conditioned material eyes? But actually, it's Krishna's causeless mercy, right? As Prabhupada says in the last line of the purport, that when he's satisfied by our sincere attempts of devotional service, he may be seen, right? And we can see the results of this causeless mercy. It's in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Ata Shri Krishna Namadi na bhavet grayam indriye sevan mukha hi jivado swayam eva spratyata. Translation. Therefore, material senses cannot appreciate Krishna's holy name, form, qualities, and pastimes. When a conditioned soul is awakened to Krishna consciousness and renders service by using his tongue to chant the Lord's holy name and taste the remnants of the Lord's food, the tongue is purified, and one gradually comes to understand who Krishna really is. Actually, Krishna's name, form, qualities, pastimes, they all are equal to Krishna. And that means that they're all spiritual and they're all full of bliss, right? But when we practice devotional service, beginning with chanting of the Mahamantra, right? And by honoring prasadam, right? Krishna prasadam, we gradually purify our senses. Right? And what happens when our senses get purified? We develop more of a taste for Krishna consciousness. We develop more of a taste to associate with the devotees, to associate with Krishna. And then what happens, right? As we engage more with the devotees, as we engage more with Krishna, we naturally find ourselves doing more devotional service, right? We naturally find ourselves following in Radharani's footsteps more and more. And that means that one day we might bind Krishna, you know? Out of Krishna's causeless mercy, he may one day decide to reveal himself to us, just as he revealed himself to Narad Muni once. So wherever we're at in our devotional practices, right, we can always endeavor to do more, right? By quality or quantity, you know, sincerity, all these things that we can think of, all these sorts of behavioral traits that we know ourselves where we're lacking, right? Some of us are lacking, okay, you know what, I'm spending like 2 hours watching Netflix, okay, you know, make it 1 hour, 1 hour more of reading or chanting or something. Or, okay, I'm chanting my japa mala, but I'm doing the mechanical process that Prabhupada clearly says there is no mechanical process to see the form of the Lord, you know? We could just chanting, but we're looking here and there, we're checking our phone, checking Instagram, all these things. Increase our quality, right? Maybe we're not chanting, you know, maybe some of us are not chanting. We can start one round, 10, 15 minutes, right? Chanting the Maha Mantra daily, preferably on beads or something. Or maybe we're chanting 4 rounds. We can endeavor to chant 6, or at least 5, you know, 1 extra round. Maybe we struggle to read. Okay, Bhagavad Gita is still a big book. Start with something small, chant and be happy. One of Prabhupada's books, you know, 10, 15 minutes a day. And if we're doing everything, then we can think of, okay, how can we improve the quality, the absorption that we have, right? For whatever little or however much we're doing, maybe we're engaging our whole time in Krishna conscious activities, but we can always have something to meditate on how we can absorb ourselves even more. I wasn't going to share this, but I'll share anyway. So actually, a couple of weeks ago, I was at Radhadesh, right, with Govardhan Maharaj and a few senior devotees, and I requested a senior devotee if I could just read with them, you know, like just observe how they read, how they absorb the Bhagavatam. So if we were sitting there, he was happy to just read what I was reading. I was reading Canto 10, and the purports are like fairly long. They're like a good couple of paragraphs. And so we were reading, and 4 or 5 paragraphs. At the end, the Prabhu was like, okay, so tell me, what do you remember? Like, could I cheat? Could I like go through the paragraphs and just remember? But he was there. He wasn't reading. He was just sitting there, just listening to me recite aloud, right? A neophyte devotee was reciting the Bhagavatam inattentively, clearly. He was just listening, but he could recall what was going on in each paragraph. And I asked Prabhu afterwards, like, we had a longer conversation, and then I asked him, like, how is it that you're able to just recall all of this, like so nicely, like the flow, what was taking place, like generally speaking, what was taking place in each paragraph, whereas I wasn't? And his answer was that it's a matter of practice and absorption, right? With practice, I mean, we hear it all the time, practice makes perfect, right? But with absorption is also necessary, because absorption, although it's a subtle thing, it actually improves our Krishna consciousness so much more. I mean, it's Krishna consciousness, right? Like, we might spend an hour, 2 hours reading, but how much of it are we actually conscious in the Bhagavatam? How much of our mental space is actually absorbed in what we're reading? Maharaj's senior devotees always say, like, if we're really present with the Bhagavatam, right, fully conscious, then we'll see Krishna on every page. But how far, at least for myself, how far am I from that? Very far, because my absorption is not there. So that's me personally, you know, that's something that I need to work on, is being more present and absorbed when I'm, whatever I'm doing, reading, listening, chanting, whatever it is, right? So one action that we can all take from here is that we should all do something more, right? Whether it's more in quantity, in quality, in absorption, something, but there's always something we can do more, right? Because if we're not pure devotees, if we're not, as Narad Muni was, right, immediately as we start chanting, if we're not crying, not in that state of bhava, then there's always something that we need to improve, right? And even at bhava, there's things to improve on, right? Because it's still not the topmost. So what to speak of our stage as sadhakas, right? So sincere, heartfelt endeavor plus the causeless mercy of the Lord equals success in spiritual life. What's in our control is that sincere, heartfelt endeavor. if we can put our hand on the heart and honestly say that actually this activity that we've just done, I've completely given my 108% in, right? Then we can say that we've put our sincere, heartfelt endeavor in. Otherwise, there's something to improve on for all of us. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for this excellent class. I now open it up for questions and comments. Are there any questions and comments? Prabhuji, till people are thinking about questions and comments, maybe I can ask 2 or 3 questions, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, Krishna gave darshan to Narad Muni and then he disappeared. So why did he do that, Prabhuji?
Wait until Friday to find out.
Okay. Okay,
I don't
Prabhuji.
want to ruin the flow, so it'll come. It'll come.
Okay. And then, Prabhuji, you talk about enthusiasm. Now, maybe you mentioned it, but I haven't processed it. How can we be enthusiastic, Prabhuji? How do we maintain this enthusiasm?
Yeah, part of that maintenance of the enthusiasm comes from that whole aspect of devotional service being a creeper, right? Naturally, anything, if it's not well looked after, it will just deplete. And that goes with our enthusiasm as well. For different people, for different devotees, there's different things that keeps them enthusiastic about Krishna consciousness, right? Some are really in tune with kirtans. So when they're feeling like, okay, my Krishna consciousness isn't really there, then they play a kirtan and they're like, bam, you know, bang on it. Some devotees really like the philosophy side of things. So as soon as they absorb themselves in reading or listening to philosophy, they're like, yes, you know, Krishna consciousness is what I want to do. So we have to find what is it that attracts us to Krishna consciousness. Oftentimes we do fall into the trap that what we started in Krishna consciousness, like the reason why we started is why we're enthusiastic and that's what keeps us going, but it's not necessarily the case. As we grow in Krishna consciousness, our taste also develops and changes. So today it might be kirtan that attracts you, tomorrow it might be the philosophy, the next day after it might just be the association with devotees, like listening to senior devotees speak. So we have to just be like, tune in with ourselves and see, okay, I'm listening to kirtan, I'm doing my japa, I'm doing this, that, and the other, all these different activities. My heart is attracted by this activity. Therefore, for me to be enthusiastic in Krishna consciousness, I need to make sure that daily or, you know, at a regular state, I always have that going. Like for me right now, reading Bhagavatam is what is attracting me, right? Well, that's what's keeping me enthusiastic about wanting to stay in Krishna consciousness. So even if my japa's gone quite badly, even if my listening is here or there, you know, I'll make sure that I dedicate some time to reading every day, because then I'll stay enthusiastic. You know what, like I've just read a pastime, I'm enthusiastic, like it's keeping me going. But I know equally, like a couple of months ago, for me, that was kirtan, you know, like listening to a specific devotee's kirtan. That's what kept me going. So we have to find what is making us tick in Krishna consciousness and make sure we have that along with other things, but make sure we have that regularly in our schedule.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Are there any other questions or comments? Yes, Panchali Mataji. Kindly unmute.
Prabhuji, thank you very much for the wonderful class. Prabhuji, I've got a comment and a quick question. So a comment is something which I find always very confusing, and I do not know the right direction for this. So when we are chanting, so as you rightly said, the power of devotion is under Radharani. So we pray to Radharani to be able to get Krishna's mercy. And then to get Radharani's mercy, we pray to Gauranga. And to get Gauranga's mercy, we pray to Lord Nityananda. So then when we are chanting, is it better to keep Lord Nityananda in mind, or should we keep Krishna and Radha and Krishna in mind? So this is something which always confuses me. So this was one of my comment. Perhaps you might be able to help me with this, Prabhuji. And my quick question is around the bhava you mentioned right towards the end of your lesson. So in the material world, so all the exalted devotees, they're all in the state of bhava. So in the material world, is it absolutely impossible to reach the state of prema? Is it only found in the spiritual world?
Okay, so in regards to the comment first, right? I don't know if the devotees on the call have like authoritative sources, but I'm just basing my sort of reciprocal comment back based off of a Maharaj that I heard not too long ago around this sort of thing. Actually, we can remember that Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu, and even the associates, right? Like when I say associates, I'm not just talking about the Panchatattva or the Acharyas, I'm even talking like Srila Prabhupada, senior devotees, etc. They're all integral and intimate associates of the Lord, right? And then Nityananda Prabhu, Mahaprabhu, we know are the Lord themselves. So in one way, it's non-different, right? Because when we're chanting, what we're actually praying for, we're praying for devotional service. And who's the giver of devotional service? It's Mahaprabhu, right? And then Mahaprabhu, through Nityananda Prabhu, through Srila Prabhupada, the Acharyas, etc., through the senior devotees, we get the devotional service. So in one way, I feel like my comment, and if any devotee wants to correct me or like comment further, that'd be nice. But my sort of reciprocal comment on that would be that it doesn't actually matter, because our prayer is about praying for devotional service. And as long as we have that mood through bona fide representatives, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, Prabhuji. Okay, thank you.
And in regards to the question, sorry, could you repeat the question? I actually forgot.
So it's the exalted devotees, they're always in a state of bhava. And then are they also in the state of prema, or is it only found in the spiritual world?
I've never heard anything on that, actually. The only comment I'd have is that Radharani was obviously in a state of prema whilst she was on the planet. So I don't know if prema is not possible in the material world. I don't know if any devotees have comments.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu Dandavat Pranam. Wonderful session. And thanks for your time giving. I have one question and I have one comment also. So first, I will give my comment on the Mataji's question regarding whether we have to remember Nityananda Prabhu or Krishna while we are meditating. Like, I'm not sure on that part of whom we have to remember or who we have to meditate upon. Usually the lotus feet of Krishna, because as we see the deities in Mayapur, this I received a reply from a senior devotee, and hence I am sharing it here. It's not my mental speculation. So the Mayapur deities are there, Panchatattva, and if you see Nityananda Prabhu, his left hand will be pointing towards Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's lotus feet, and his right hand will be up to the sky. So even if we go to Nityananda Prabhu, he will tell, oh no, my dear, you have to go to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, go to his feet. He will give you everything. So obviously we have to go to the lotus feet, and he will point to back and forth. So that's what I got the answer from a senior devotee. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Thank you very much for sharing that. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. And Prabhuji, I have a question also. Actually, you said the enthusiasm and endeavor and the patience, right? But in that sloka, there will be 6, right? Utsahan, Nishya, Dairya, Tattat Karma Pravartanat, Sangatyaga, Shatovritti, right? But why you concentrated only upon the 3 factors? Is there any specific reason why those 3 are, especially why you took that? I'm just curious. I think I'm missing something on the subject. That's why. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, no, you're right. There are 6 principles. The reason why I focused on those 3 is because, personally speaking, I felt like those 3 tied very nicely with the theme of avoiding the mechanical process, right? Because we can see, like, tatat karma pravartana, they said like the other three principles, we can do those quite mechanically, very easily. You know, like we can just follow, okay, the Acharya did this, I'll do this. Okay, abandon the association of non-devotees. Okay, like Hare Krishna family, you're not devotees, I'll leave you and go live separately. We can do those very mechanically, but with enthusiasm, with confident endeavor, and with patience, it's actually quite difficult to do them mechanically, right? So that was my reasoning. But you're right, like all six are very equally important, but for the theme that of today's class is, that's why I focused on those three.
Wonderful, wonderful, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. I didn't get this point. Thank you for clarifying. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, Prabhuji, since we still have some time, I beg to indulge and ask you another question. Prabhuji, when you say absorption, so does that mean, for example, I was just trying to meditate on saying, what does absorption mean for me? So maybe, is it like when you are, this is a very mundane example, but when you are seeing a movie, you get involved and you become the hero, the heroine, and when they cry, you cry, and when they laugh, you laugh. So does that mean when you listen to Krishna Katha or when you do any activities, that is absorption, that you're feeling what, if it is Srimad Bhagavatam, you're feeling whatever is going around? Or please explain this word absorption, Prabhuji.
It's a perfect analogy, actually, because I think I'm sure everybody on this call has watched a movie before, you know. So it's a perfect analogy. The only thing I will say is that we do have to be careful, because there's a borderline whereby we can become a bit Sahaja-esque, meaning that we can pretend like we're one of the characters and then start meditating on that prematurely. So when we start talking about absorbing ourselves, yeah, the movie example works perfectly fine, but it's more of the fact that our attention is fully involved, you know. I think another example you can see is like, say, okay, you're a parent, so when your child left the house, you know, like maybe for school studies, like for a long time, not just like for the day or something, your mind was absorbed in your child, right? Like, oh, you know, are they eating on time? Are they sleeping on time? Are they doing this, that, and the other? Externally, you're doing your daily activities, you're cooking, you're cleaning, going to work, operations, whatever you do, you know, but your whole mind is just like fully focused on them. So now imagine you're reading the Bhagavatam and your attention is on the Bhagavatam, right? So your external activity is coinciding with your consciousness to be absorbed. So then all you're thinking about is the Bhagavatam. What's happening around you doesn't matter anymore, because you're focused on the Bhagavatam, right? And we see in advanced devotees, especially, like at the manner we're fortunate to have SB Keshav Maharaj, right? The Sutapa Prabhu. In morning japa period, he'd usually sit in the temple room with the devotees to chant. So we can see his absorption. And I remember when I was in the ashram, then I remember one day, like Tulsi Ma was being taken, and then, you know, there's the pots, the water pots, etc. Somebody had dropped it on the floor. And this is just near the end of japa period. Most of us opened our eyes and just was like, oh, what happened, you know? But I was fortunate to sit quite close to SB Keshav Maharaj. So then I looked at him. He was still absorbed in his japa, you know, like what was going on didn't matter to him. Whether he even recognized that something was going on, and I don't know, you know, but that's the absorption that we can kind of build up. And I'm just inspired to comment on one other point here. Oftentimes, this is something I'm very guilty of, but I think majority of us, because of the age we live in, this fast track age, oftentimes we find ourselves multitasking a lot, right? And and I feel this myself, which is why I'm sharing. Oftentimes, because we multitask so much, when we come to spiritual practices, our body needs to multitask. Like for me, I'm just putting my hand up. I struggle to sit down and chant for 1 hour. You know, I need to move around. I need to have two things going on. My mind is engaged or trying to be engaged in the japa, but I need my body to be functioning. And that's because we're so used to multitasking. right? So actually multitasking in one way is a boon, you know, we get more things done, more efficient, etc. if you can actually multitask. But equally, it's a detriment for us because it ruins our absorption, it ruins our focus. So yeah, that's something that I think we all can work on as well, is to be present. When we're doing an activity, be present in that activity. When we're cooking, be present in the fact that we're cooking for Krishna, right? Because that in itself is devotional service. Yes, okay, you know, family will eat it, but who's eating it first? Krishna, you're giving the bhoga to Krishna first. So we can meditate, okay, I'm cooking this for Krishna. Let me cook in a way that pleases Krishna. And let me cook under the instructions of Radharani. She is the queen of the kitchen. So we should try to be present in everything we do, and then naturally our absorption increases.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Excellent example. In fact, I'm living one today. My grandson, whom I haven't seen since 4 or 5 months, so I don't know about his routine, but he is now 10 months old, and he went to school today from 8 to 5:30. So I'm constantly thinking, what must he be doing? Are they going to treat him well? Did he eat? Was his nappy changed? So I can really understand what you said. And today was a good example that in spite of not knowing him, I'm constantly thinking of him. So that's a way I should meditate even Krishna. So thank you very much. I acknowledge the presence of new devotees today. Pooja, Chiplunkar, MK, Sayer. Thank you all for joining in today. And we have this group every day at the same time, same link. So kindly join us if you can. And Prabhuji will be coming back to us on Friday as well. So if you're following him, this is an advertisement again. So thank you very much for your time. We've exhausted our time today. Can I request Prahlad Prabhu to kindly end the session? Prahlad Prabhu, we can do 3 Haribols for the new devotees who have joined, for the devotees who have joined us. They are not new, I'm sure they are
Yes, Haribol, Hare Krishna.
Sincere devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Yes, Prahlad is not around, so I'll end the session on his behalf.
Yes,
Yes.
Mataji, yes, please do.
Yeah, thank you so much for the encouraging words and encouraging lecture. And we really appreciate you getting some time to come and feed us with this nectar. On behalf of all devotees, I would like to thank you for having some time to come. And I would request all the devotees to unmute and chant in glorification for Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare
Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Ram
Rama
Ram
Rama,
Hare.
Vancha
Kalpataruvyasya Vasindhuvaya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki. His Grace, can't remember the name.
Brijesh Prabhuji.
Jai.
ISKCON Elderet Ki Jai.
Jai. All glories to assembled devotees.
Hare
Krishna.
Hare
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Haribols. If we can chant 3 Haribols for the newcomers. Haribol, Haribol, Haribol.
Haribol. Haribol. Haribol.